So Women Ed Malaysia is for everybody. It is to connect people, Malaysia and beyond. It's wonderful to see so many familiar names and some familiar faces, and also some joiners from Women Ed Thailand with us this evening. So you're with us for the second of our series in Wellbeing Wednesdays. We had amazing speakers last month. We have two delightful speakers again for you this evening. If you've got any questions as we go along, do put them in the chat and the team will monitor them. And then we'll have a little break between the speakers and we'll answer some questions before moving on to the next one. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Karen, one of our team members, to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Katie. Good evening, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Daniel Pillay. She's a clinical psychologist at Ara Damansara Medical Center. Dania works with children and her areas of expertise include ADHD and autism disorder, bullying, parent-child relationships, adjustment disorder, and anxiety and depression. Like many psychologists, she's been noticing that since the start of the pandemic, more children are presenting with psychological difficulties, and also more parents are concerned about their children's mental health. As well as being a psychologist, Daniel's also an educator and she's a parent. So she really understands the challenges of the pandemic for nurturing children's mental health from all perspectives, that as a healthcare professional, a teacher, and a parent. So over to you, Dania. Thank you very much.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be here, and I'll be speaking today about nurturing children's mental health during this pandemic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'll just start. All right, can you see my screen? Yes, okay. All right, so I'll start now. All right, so this is what we'll be talking about today. Again, some of these things are things that we have all worked through over the year and a half, almost 2 years now. So we'll try and cover a few strategies, really, things that we can help with our children and the teenagers alike. Yeah, so what we'll be covering is children's mental health, challenges during the pandemic, some behaviors that we can look out for, as well as strategies. All right. So now, when we talk about children's mental health, what really are we talking about? When we talk about kids, we're talking about reaching developmental, emotional, social milestones, right? And knowing how to cope when there are problems. Yeah. And essentially, when we talk about children having a healthy mindset, is about having positive quality of life and being able to function in different settings, right? Oops, sorry, hang on. Sorry. Can you hang on a second? All right, sorry. Yes, so then we also want to talk about things like throughout this time during the lockdown, as well as school closures, we want to look at what are the things that kids have been experiencing and how do we actually help them move forward into the coming months, into the new normal, right? How do we help them do that? And what are the things that we can do to support them to resume school, to resume moving forward, really, right? So now, this is a statistic that UNICEF just released a couple of weeks ago, right? So what they found was that 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds live with a diagnosed mental disorder, right? And here the key word is diagnosed mental disorder. There are many, many children who are living with various challenges and difficulties who don't quite fulfill the criteria for a mental disorder, but yet they're struggling, right? And that's where we come in, because what we can do to stop things from escalating further, right? And there are lots of kids who struggle with various things, you know, anxiety, depression, and again, sometimes it might not be depression per se, like textbook depression, but they're still struggling, right? Worries, things like that, right? So here's where we need to step in, right? Teachers, parents, whatever we can do. So now let's just go through some of the challenges that we see during the pandemic, right? That we've seen. So let's start with challenges in changes in daily routine. This is a huge one, right? So we have got kids having to physically distance from family, friends, and that's a really big change for them, right? Not being able to see their grandparents, their cousins, not being able to do the regular things that they do, going to the park, all their regular classes, no swimming, no dance, no music, right? So everything is just gone, right? Changes in learning and education. So this is a huge one, something that was a big, again, virtual learning, right? In the beginning, when this all started, I saw a lot of kids and teenagers being super excited. Yay, you know, we don't have to go to school. You know, awesome, I can just study in my pajamas, you know. But after a while, it was just like, okay, no, I'm over this, right? It's just very, very taxing. Even for us, sitting through a 1 hour Zoom meeting can be difficult. So imagine these kids having to sit through 6 hours of school every day for the past few months, right? So yeah, it's very challenging. And then we've got difficulties with people who've got difficulty with access to technology, connectivity issues, not having enough gadgets at home, you know, for all the kids to have access to classes. Then we've got changes in continuity of health services, right? So kids who miss their regular checkups, kids who need access to speech therapy, occupational therapy, mental health services, and all these things have been stopped or stalled, right? And this is a big one too, miss significant life events, right? So kids who have had their graduation skipped, concerts, holidays, you know, milestone events that they've planned or were looking forward to, and everything's just gone down the drain, right? So yeah, it's a lot to process. And also with a lot of children, really, not some, safety and security concerns. You know, there are parents who have to work, and some kids have to fend for themselves at home. I mean, even if they're older, but you know, it's been difficult. And then parents who've had economic hardships, you know, financial difficulties, security concerns. So all these things come to play as well. And again, just have to bring this in right now with kids being online a lot. There's also we need to think about them being online and increased risk of cyberbullying, you know, sexual exploitation online, grooming. So, and again, there's only so much parents can do if they're not at home and they're at work, right? So there are a lot of these things that are going on, have gone on, and that we need to really try and address. And again, another thing to talk about is also typically developing kids have difficulties. What more kids with disabilities and neurodevelopmental issues, right? So they might have even stronger reactions to what's going on now. So they might have more intense distress, worry, anger, you know, because they have hardly any control over what's going on with their lives right now, right? They have no control about what's happening day to day. So they might need a bit more assurance, you know, with, and maybe prepping them for what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen day after tomorrow, right? So now let's just talk about behavior changes to look out for, right? So as teachers, as parents, these are things that we might see on a day-to-day basis. This list is not exhaustive, right? And we have to understand that reactions to the pandemic and what's going on can be very different, right? So different kids may react differently, but in general, these are just some that I've seen, and I'm sure you guys have seen as well, right? So new and challenging behaviors are unnatural responses. So let's just look at some of them, right? So in younger kids, excessive crying or irritation, and then regression. So returning to behaviors that they have outgrown. So toileting accidents, bedwetting, right? Worrying, just being down in general, right? Being sad, worried, changes in eating or sleeping habits. Right? So that's really common as well. Irritability, acting out behaviors in teens. Well, not just teens. I've seen this in younger kids as well. Poor school performance, avoiding school. I mean, that can be just pretending to be in their Zoom class, but having 3 different tabs open, playing a game, chatting with a friend, you know, just, And in the same line, difficulties with attention and concentration, not being able to focus, being clingy, being overly attached, and then avoidance or loss of interest in things that they used to like, just blah about everything, just not interested. Right. So, and again, some psychosomatic concerns. So again, unexplained headaches or body aches or stomach ache. I don't feel like going to school today. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Right. So these are some of the things that might be presenting in kids. Okay. So now, again, before we go to the strategies, just wanted to mention, again, as simple as it sounds, this is something that we can all do. Right. So we want to listen, we want to comfort, and we want to reassure. So when we talk about listening, just give children the opportunity to talk about what they're feeling. And this might not be easy for many kids, but again, the more we do it, the easier it gets. Right. So encourage them to share their concerns, ask questions, and with comfort, it doesn't have to be something out of the ordinary. Just use simple tools to comfort and calm them. It could be telling stories, singing with them, playing games, praise them for their strengths and, being courageous at this time, right? And again, to reassure them that us adults, that's our job. We are going to keep them safe. That's what we are here to do, right? So just to provide them with accurate information, age-appropriate information, so they're not left in the dark about what's going on as well, right? And again, I think a lot of us adults feel that we need to have the answers for everything, but the truth is we don't. And that's okay, just being honest with them and comforting, that's really what we can do, So now let's move on to some strategies, right? So the first one is following up on what I said before, the 3 R's, right? So reassurance, routines, and regulation. So reassurance is what I said before, right? Ensuring them, explaining to them that their safety, and the safety of their loved ones even. I've seen many kids who are not just concerned about what's going on around, but they're concerned about their grandparents, like, I haven't seen grandma in a long time. I saw in the news that old people are more prone to getting COVID and dying. What's happening? We can't go to the nursing home. They've got all these concerns, right? So reassuring them. And a really big one is routines, right? It really helps to maintain a sense of safety and predictability. And during this pandemic, more than ever, it's important to maintain this, so regular bedtimes, meals, daily schedules for like learning and play. It makes a really big difference for teenagers as well as children, because it's predictable yet flexible enough to kind of meet their individual needs on a daily basis, right? And then on top of that, regulation. So, in terms of emotional regulation, they might be processing a lot of things at this time. So we need to help manage these reactions so we can validate their feelings. Things like, I know this is really overwhelming. I know this is scary. How do we move forward with this? So we got to encourage them to engage in activities that help them self-regulate. So maybe, exercise, meditation, mindfulness, deep breathing, things like that. So we want to encourage these things as well. And next strategy, again, this is something I guess we all struggled with before, social distancing is really, it's not social isolation, right? And this is really important because especially for the younger kids, having quality time with their parents and loved ones, it really improves social connectedness and that improves resiliency as well. So we need to find ways to kind of connect despite being distant. So you can use technology in that way, right? Online video chats, doing a pizza Zoom party, something where they still feel connected to their friends, although they're not physically next to each other. Okay, and this one, managing media exposure, right? Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of screen time right now, and we need to monitor what they're reading, what they're watching, and make sure that it's age appropriate, right? Because sometimes when they don't have the information, they go looking for it themselves, and that might not lead to very accurate information. So check in with them regularly about the information that they see online to ensure the accuracy, and we need to kind of help resolve any misperceptions. And before moving forward, this is a question that I've always gotten from many parents, about the screen time that they've been exposed to during this pandemic, on top of learning. After learning, I want to play video games now. I want to speak to my friend now. So it's like 9 hours a day online, looking at the screen. So what do we do about that? And again, when we talk about being exposed to screen time, there's so much of stimulus feedback. You get lights, you get colors, you get sounds. And then when you say, okay, go read a book, go do a puzzle, it's like, most boring thing ever, right? Why would I do that when I can be online? So again, there needs to be some sort of limit, to the amount of time they spend online. But again, we can think of technology as a potential source of creativity and like active learning, right? So coding, creating games, art, design, watching videos, exercise videos, video games that require physical movement, so things like this is active, whereas passive would be, just watching something, so our aim would be to spend more time doing active rather than passive entertainment online, right? Next, keep them busy. So again, this is something that we all can try to do, right? When they're bored, their levels of worry and disruptive behavior might increase, right? So we can try and provide safe activities for them to do, games, music, art, all these kind of things. And we can even brainstorm with the slightly older kids what they want to do, right? It can be different for everybody. It could be reading, it could be baking, talking to friends, drawing, anything. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of parents who tend to overschedule this as well. They're like, oh, he's really free, he's at home, he's got nothing to do, and they've got back-to-back classes. They've got dance class from 5 to 6, and then half an hour break, and then they've got art class from 6:30 to 7:30, and it's just non-stop. So even that might be counterproductive. It's okay for them not to have anything to do at some point, because being somewhat free, let them figure out what to do. They can just use their imagination, their creativity. So having free time, having some space is also important, right? Empower them, right? So especially during these times of being uncertain and having a lot of fear, kids, when they have some sort of agency, like when they feel they have control over things, so self-efficacy, it's really important. And a lot of kids just tell me things like, what can I do? Mom just says I have to sit at home. I can't do anything. Is there anything I can do to sort of help this situation? So it would be very beneficial for a kid to feel like, okay, I'm giving back. Okay, I'm doing something. I'm not just being protected here at home. So, things like, I know families who prepare food packs, for the disadvantaged. So the kid helps with that. Right. So, doing anything that it feels like they're helping, creating artwork for older people, making supplies. I know a family who started sewing cloth masks and giving it around the neighborhood. So, the kid did that as well. So he felt like he's contributing, like I'm doing something for the community. So writing letters or making cards for frontliners, thank you for your work, things like that. So these are things that kids can do as well, where they feel like they're actually doing something, right? In relation to that as well, we can help kids create like a SMART goal. So a SMART goal means like, SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So it could be something as simple as I'm going to take a daily walk for the next 1 week, right? And even accomplishing that is very valuable. Even achieving the smallest goal at this time, it can be a really good positive reinforcement, right? So that's something else that we can do with them. And this one, spending time with them, again, just it's been very difficult for a lot of families, especially when they're working from home, to truly spend time with their kids. Compartmentalizing work and home has been very challenging. And I know families who say that, it's hard for me to shut off work when I'm right there. I mean, I've been called out by my 6-year-old as well. I'm looking at my phone, I'm checking emails, but I'm next to her pretending to entertain her, right? So again, even a few minutes where you're fully engaged with your kid makes a big difference. And they know it. We might think we're fooling them, but they know it. Again, another thing is, I've mentioned this before as well, just to emphasize positivity and hope, talking about stories where, people have come together, we found solutions, we've overcome difficulties, and we're moving forward now. Talking about stories like this can be very healing and reassuring, not just for the kids, but even for us, right? And providing accurate and age-appropriate information again. So we might feel not telling them this information is helpful. We're protecting them. But again, if they rely on their imaginations, it goes wild and they will lack appropriate information. So again, focusing on age-appropriate information, giving it to them in a developmentally appropriate way helps, right? And then again, learning to accept uncertainty. So this is a really hard one, even for adults, right? Uncertainty is a natural part of life, even if you're in a pandemic or not, right? And there are many things that we cannot control, right? So again, it's not possible to eliminate uncertainty fully, but focusing on it can just worsen our anxiety and worries, right? So it just makes it a lot harder. So instead of fighting it, learning to accept and cope is a lot more helpful. Yeah. So again, this is what we can tell our children as well, to focus on what can be controlled, right? So what can be controlled is, although we may not be able to see our friends or family, what can we do to meaningfully connect? So again, coming up with ways to connect, right? And then another strategy would be practicing mindfulness or other similar coping mechanisms, right? So to focus on the now, to focus on in the moment experience rather than what may or may not happen in the future. I have a list of some resources that I'll share later in the chat, right? Some apps that we can use with kids and teenagers. And I think that will be quite helpful. So I'll share that in a while in the chat, right? And one of the most important strategies I feel is for parents and educators to really be a good role model, right? Things that we can do, again, they're all common sense things, but if we do it or not is a different story, right? Take breaks. We need to take breaks. We need to participate in restorative activities. It can be whatever, meditation, journaling, baking, whatever works for you, right? Some physical activity, exercise, eating and sleeping well, modeling how to manage feelings. Like if kids see you not being calm, being super stressed, that's what they're getting off you. And this is the way mom manages it. So I'm learning from her, right? I mean, we are literally, they imitate us. Whatever they see is what they're learning, right? Connecting with friends and family members is really important as well. And yeah, so taking care of your emotional, mental, and physical health would be a big priority. And yeah, I think we all have to always remember that taking care of yourself is part of taking care of kids, right? So yeah, putting yourself first is not wrong. I wanted to share this as well. This is also part of the resources that I'll share later. This was a book that was released in 2020. The top one here, My Hero Is You, How Kids Can Fight COVID-19, right? And in 2021, in the second year of the pandemic, they came up with this other book, which is called My Hero Is You, How Kids Can Cope with COVID-19, right? And it's a really helpful book. So the second one drew upon a survey and all their responses from over 5,000 children, parents, and teachers about the challenges faced by kids, right? So it follows this fantasy creature who goes around the world teaching children about how to hope for the future, what are some of the coping mechanisms you can use, how to deal with your emotions, so it's really nice, and it's available in various languages, right? And it's aimed at kids about 6 to 11 years old. And again, this is a book that you wouldn't want your kid to read by themselves. It's something you would do together, right? So parents can do it, or you can do it in school as part of reading time or as part of a lesson. It's something that it's quite nice. So yeah, I'll put that in the resources later. And just a quick word about returning to school. I know this is like something that everybody's thinking about. There's some kids who are super excited and ready to go, whereas there are other kids who are just like anxious and worried, and what's it going to be like? Am I on track? Am I going to be able to cope? What's it going to be like at school? Is everything going to be different or the same, right? And speaking about that, I remember seeing a little 6-year-old boy who said to me, I just want to be able to go to school and touch my friends. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, because I'm sitting so far away from them. I can't eat next to them. I can't play tag with them. I'm in school, but it's not the same at all. Right. So it's very difficult for them to process all of this. So also for teachers to understand that things will not be exactly the same when kids come back. Right. They might not be able to learn at the same pace as they have done before. right? Their attention might not be the same as well. Their ability to, focus. And it might not be I think it'll be a good idea, in fact, especially when you first go back, to have like maybe half an hour once a week or something, to have some sort of like a support group, for kids to talk to each other just in your class. Like, what did you experience in the last few months? Because they need to know that this was a shared experience, right? They all went through this, it wasn't just one off, right? So they can talk about what they experienced, so they understand that, okay, we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat, right? Yeah, so discussing it, I think, would be something very useful for the kids, even the younger ones and the teenagers, right? And I just want to end with this nice quote. I feel, it's about embracing what we have, still having hope for the future. And I know that while this pandemic seems endless and there's no like definitive end date, and it can be really difficult to just move forward, I think it's really important to remain hopeful and understand that, things are, we've come quite far from when we started, and we are on the road to recovery, I hope, right? So, yeah, so, just to keep that in mind and help our children move forward that way as well, right? So that's it from me. Thank you. Hope you found it helpful.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our next speaker. Rhiannon Phillips Fianco joins us all the way from The Hague in the Netherlands today, and I'm incredibly excited to have her present to you all. Rhiannon is a teacher. She works at the British School in the Netherlands, and she is a mum. She's been teaching a long, long time. But over the past 3 years, she has, and I will say, masterminded the most fantastic wellbeing and healthy minds curriculum for the children in her school. Not only has she developed a fantastic curriculum and educated the teachers in the school, but she has also educated the students to cope with their own mental health and their own well-being, and done extensive work with parents as well to support them. And recently we were lucky enough to have Rhiannon join us at the school that I work at. She came and did an hour's inset with our staff, who were just blown away, so much so that many of them are back here again today to hear her speak again. So I'm going to let Rhiannon explain to you all about what she does. I hope that whether you're a parent, an educator, or just someone interested in mental health and well-being, that you'll be able to take away something from what Rhiannon's about to share, because she's a teacher whose passion is mental health and well-being, and that is her mission, to get everybody understanding how we can all play a part in supporting our children. So I'm going to hand over to Rhiannon. Welcome, Rhiannon.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me and see my screen? Fantastic, thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. I appreciate people giving up their valuable time in the evening. And I'm really looking forward to sharing our Healthy Mind strategy with you all. So first of all, before I begin, just to give you an idea of who I am, as Rebecca said, I'm a mum of 16-year-old twins. So a lot of what I share comes from my experience in the home as well as at school. I'm a class teacher. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I always teach upper key stage 2, so that's years 4, 5 and 6. And my current role, which has been for the last 3 years, is a wellbeing and mental health curriculum leader. I'm a qualified mental health first aider, and I've done courses in wellbeing coaching and positive psychology. And I think what's really important for you to know, either as an educator or as a parent, is I came to this not as a mental health expert, but I came from the perspective of somebody who is with children all day, every day. And I just really wanted to make well-being, give it a central point and make it a priority at the heart of everything that was in my classroom. And then I was given the privilege of being able to do that across school as well. So I'd like to share the initiative with you, and then the presentation is very much full of practical ideas that I hope you can take away and use straight away. Because in all the work I've done with staff and parents, the feedback I've constantly received is that people just want practical ideas that they think, right, I can use and I can apply this from tomorrow. So that's what I really hope to achieve. So to begin with, I'd like to show you a 90-second video that summarises the initiative in our school, just to give you a thorough background to what I'm talking about. Our Healthy Minds initiative is based on positive psychology principles. They aim to foster positive emotions in children, develop emotional intelligence, develop resilience, and we teach explicit coping strategies.
I think the most important thing to us is, right from the beginning, is that our aim was that this isn't something that's going to be a bolt-on initiative.
The process involved every member of staff from the very beginning. We had a wellbeing team of 16 members of staff throughout the school. And over time this has developed so that we've also encompassed workshops for parents so that they can use those strategies in the home as well. And we now have Healthy Minds ambassadors amongst our students who share strategies throughout the school as they've gained in confidence in them in the last couple of years.
The BSN Healthy Minds initiative here at Junior School Leitchfane supports our vision, mission and values as a school. Embedding mental health and well-being into their daily routine helps our children to grow into confident individuals. We aim to encourage the whole child, head, hand and heart.
So that video was put together for the International School Awards that we were delighted to be finalists for at the beginning of this year for the Wellbeing Initiative. Of course, it's always nice to be recognised in that way, nice to have a certificate to display in our school foyer. But actually, the most important thing that's come of that is very much what I'm doing right now, because it's given us a voice and people want to hear what we're doing. And for me, that's the most important thing, because it just gives us the chance to support the well-being of as many children worldwide as we possibly can. So we're very, very keen to share, and we hope that at the end of this, you'll take away something useful that you can use both in the home or in the classroom. So the starting point that I always take when I speak to both teachers and parents is a reminder that although 1 in 4 people in their lifetimes experiences mental illness, that 4 in 4 of us has mental health that we need to look after. And as was mentioned in the previous presentation, we need to look after ourselves as much as we need to look after the students around us. And I think in order to have confidence that we're doing the right thing, it's really helpful to think about the mental health spectrum, because as educators and parents, sometimes we might be concerned that we lack the appropriate skills and knowledge to get it right, and we fear getting it wrong. But if we look at this as if we're considering the physical health, where we wouldn't hesitate to remind a child to exercise or eat healthily or sleep properly in order to keep themselves healthy and to cope with daily life, that's very much been the approach that we've had with mental health as well. We should get to the point where we feel as confident giving them advice in managing their mental health as we do with physical health. And then when we feel that a child is beginning to struggle or going in towards the unwell end of the spectrum, that's when we call in the experts, whether they are school counsellors, recommending that parents take their child to a GP. So we recognise where our role is. And essentially the positive psychology approach is all about prevention. And there's so much we can do at those healthy and coping ends of the spectrum to help families and children prevent small difficulties becoming bigger ones. So a huge part of our work has been about developing the emotional intelligence of our children. And we can do this both as parents and as educators. Very often we do it naturally without even stopping to think about what we're doing. But what we've done is try to make it a more central part of what we do and teach it more explicitly. So the very first area that we realised that we needed to work on was emotional literacy. Research shows that people who could label their feelings using rich vocabulary were found to be 40% less verbally and physically aggressive than those who had a tough time working out how they felt. Now, when you look at research like that and you work in an international community like ours, where our children come from 80 different nationalities, it was quite striking to read and think, wow, how can we go about making sure that our children have the language that they need to express how they're feeling? So one of the first things that we developed was our own emotions chart, and you'll find this on display all over our school, but it's really snowballed in a very positive way. We've had it translated into 10 different languages, with our international parent community helping us to translate it into more languages. And it's all been about giving our children the emotional literacy that they need to express how they're feeling, and to go beyond the happy, sad and mad, which is what they were doing before. And we've seen a marked improvement in how they communicate the way that they're feeling, which is the first step towards managing those feelings. Here are the multilingual emotions charts that we've got, that our parent body has helped us translate. Of course, the first was Dutch, as we're in the Netherlands. But it's been really nice to have families reach out and just say, oh, it would really help us if we could have it in this language. And just this week, I saw a German child in year 5 who came into school crying every day because she was really struggling to express herself with very limited English. And one of our TAs printed off the German emotions chart and put it in front of her. And we just saw the stress dissolve. Her shoulders went down. She just visibly relaxed as she suddenly realized, wow, I've now got a tool to communicate how I'm feeling. This is an example of a year 1 class, and I love this photograph because you have such a range of responses. You can see the emotions chart is on the board. There's a book on the floor. It's a book they're exploring to help them develop empathy for characters, because for young children to develop empathy for others is not easy. But I love the combination of smiles, of fidgets, some children fidgeting, some really comfortable. All of them have got breathing buddies that are teddy bears that they've learned to put on their belly when they're doing a breathing exercise. So rather than thinking about the breathing, they think about the rise and fall of their breathing buddy, which is something that's got our younger children responding really well to breathing techniques. And I think that photo in itself is a lovely reflection of how you can work even with a big group on exploring emotions and create a safe and positive environment for doing that. Within that, what we also teach, particularly our older students, is the importance of recognizing all their emotions and of understanding that something like anger is often disguised as other emotions underneath it. And again, giving them that vocabulary to recognize, okay, I'm feeling really angry right now. Why might I be feeling angry? And for some children, you might need to give that language to them. So it might be that you can say, well, I can see that you're angry. Do you think perhaps that you're embarrassed because you've just tripped over your brother in front of your friends and you're feeling a bit embarrassed and awkward about it and you're lashing out towards your brother? Just to put that language to give them that language so that they can express it and think, oh yeah, actually this isn't anger. It just helps them gain a deeper understanding of how they're feeling. So exploring language can be on the surface level with younger children more limited, but of course the older children get, the more we can explore that in depth. And we also work hard to help our children recognize how they feel in their bodies. So if a child is feeling very upset and finds that they don't have the vocabulary they need for expressing it, perhaps just asking them how their tummy feels, or how their hands are feeling, or if they notice anything about their body at all, and giving them the opportunity to recognize, well, sometimes my body might be giving me messages that my head hasn't quite understood, is a really important part of developing that emotional intelligence. And of course, as well as using literature, using films can be really helpful. And I love this film years back when I watched it with my own daughters, Inside Out. And it's a very clever film that looks into the way the mind works and has different characters to represent different emotions like sadness and fear. And I shared this with Key Stage 2 this week. We were exploring compassion. And there's a lovely scene that you've got on the right-hand side where sadness comes forward and somebody else is just trying to cheer this character up. And sadness just actually shows compassion and understanding. And as this psychiatrist says when she refers to this film, is she talks about the fact that it gives great examples of characters showing empathy and understanding, and that we don't always just need to go to that, I just want to cheer you up and make it better. We can just acknowledge that sometimes things are hard, and that makes someone feel seen and heard and feel that, okay, now I'm ready to move on because I've been listened to. And even young children are able to do that once they're explicitly taught that that's what they can do. So once we've developed the emotional intelligence for recognizing how we feel and putting it into words, or recognizing what it feels like in our body, the key then is to teach coping strategies for dealing with it. And we teach a whole range of strategies, but I think this quote is really, really fundamental. If we want children and teens to be able to apply coping strategies when they are overwhelmed, we need to teach and practice them when they're calm. And as both a parent and as a teacher, I think this is the most important thing that's key to the message that we try to share. And it's also important to remember that even when they seem disinterested, that sometimes the techniques will come back and they'll use them when you least expect them to. So trying to teach a number of these techniques to my skeptical teenagers has been difficult. But what I have noticed is that then actually they begin to use them when they're struggling. So more of it goes in with our teens than we think it is, that we think at times. Now, for those of you who saw my presentation for Rebecca's school, I've shared this story with you before, but it's really worth sharing again, because this was really fundamental for me in reminding me about what we're teaching here is a life skill, and a skill that can be taken beyond the classroom and into the home and into everyday life. Hot chocolate breathing is a breathing technique that we teach all of our students. And it's to do with imagining that you're holding a warm mug of hot chocolate. And first you're going to breathe it in because it smells so delicious. And then you're going to blow on it to cool it down. And as you can imagine, it's a technique that appeals to lots and lots of children. We've been doing this for about a year. So as an educator, I might use it in my classroom when I feel that the mood of the class needs to be calmed down a little bit. And I'll just sit there and put my hands together and say, okay, let's just do some hot chocolate breathing. When I knew it had real impact was in a situation where our emergency alarm went off for our stay safe inside procedure, which involved everybody, rather than evacuating the building for a fire drill, everybody had to go into, we have large walk-in cupboards where people go to keep themselves safe. And as a teacher, I knew that a practice wasn't scheduled, and it was at 10 to 9 in the morning. So I knew that it was highly unusual that we were having a practice at that time. And I felt the colour drain from my face. It was genuine fear, because I wondered what was going on. And my children even told me later, they said, wow, Mrs. Phillips, you went white. And I know I did, because I felt it. But we ended up in this cupboard with 40 children and 2 teachers. And a child suddenly spoke up. The level of fear in the room was really, really high. And a boy suddenly spoke up and he whispered and he said, Mrs. Phillips, hot chocolate breathing. And he prompted me in a situation where he felt anxiety. And I led in a whisper, because we weren't supposed to talk, 40 children in a breathing technique that brought the anxiety level from up here right down. And I could feel it in the room, and so could they. And later on in the day, the deputy head teacher told me that the same had happened to him. He was in a cupboard with a group of 4-year-olds, a teaching assistant and a parent with a baby in a pushchair. And the teaching assistant had said exactly the same thing straight away. Let's use the hot chocolate breathing. And you can imagine this parent just couldn't believe this group of 4-year-olds who suddenly had their hands like this, as if they were breathing in their hot chocolate. And again, it brought the mood right down. And it's important to say that it was a glitch in the system and there was no emergency that day at all. But what was great was that strategies we'd been using had been put into action. So another tool that we use that you might have heard of is Go Noodle, which is full of videos, both for relaxation. All of these ones are relaxing ones, and also brain breaks to get everyone going. You can get free access as a parent and as an educator. It's an app you can have on your phone or on your PC, and our students really respond well to it. And lots of the different activities lead to important discussions about learning things like when we panic, we might go into fight, flight or freeze mode, and we'll use a strategy like melting to help us understand how our body will respond to that. The key really is what we aim to do is teach our students a whole range of as many different strategies as possible. And these I've taken from a great educator and counsellor I found on Instagram, who shares lots of different strategies. And we expose our children to as many as we possibly can. And then we empower them to make the choice when they need to use whatever works for them. So it's not about us dictating. Of course, at times we'll lead the whole class, but we give them that element of choice to think about what they need. And We'll encourage them to think about how they might use it in the home. So some of them have created their own posters. Some of them have translated them into their home language in recognition of the fact that when I'm anxious, I can't think straight in English and I need to have it in my home language, and created posters for their bedroom walls. This is what I need to help myself when I am struggling. And then within that, every classroom in our school has a calm corner with a sofa and a rug and some cushions, so that children, even in the middle of a lesson, if they feel that they're panicking or they're anxious, that they can choose to go into the calm corner and use one of the strategies that we've taught them. And when I shared this with staff for the first time, they were a bit skeptical and thought, well, yeah, well, aren't they just going to spend all day in the calm corner? But actually, they're really mature about it, and they just appreciate that chance to be entrusted to do it and then to come back and join us when they're ready. And at the end of my assembly that I did on Monday on compassion, a little girl in year 3 came straight up to me and said, Mrs. Phillips, you talked about crying, and when I cry at home, I go to my calm corner until I feel better. And I didn't know that she'd created a calm corner at home, but for her, it was just an automatic response. I've got a calm corner in the classroom, it makes me feel better. Why not create one at home as well? And I love the fact that her parents have supported her in that. So when we're speaking to children, whether they're our own or their own in our class, something I found really helpful for coaching them when dealing with their emotions, certainly with the older children, is to ask them if they want, once they've let off steam and just let it all out, to ask them if they want to vent, if they want advice, or they want me to take action. Now, obviously, we have a safeguarding responsibility as educators, and sometimes we might have to take action even if they don't want us to. But particularly as a parent, I found this really, really helpful. And 9 times out of 10, my daughters just want to vent, and they don't actually even want to hear what my opinion is or what my advice might be, but they feel better and they can walk away. They feel that they've let it go, they've talked it through. And I was listening to one of my daughters, they're 16, and she was speaking to a friend the other day, and her friend had obviously done a lot of talking. And then my daughter said to her, okay, do you want to vent or do you want my advice? And I thought, that's brilliant. And that's, I heard our previous speaker talking about the fact that we are role models to our children. And it's so true when you hear it come back in the language that they're using in their relationships, you're reminded about how powerful that can be. And something that I really talk to parents an awful lot about and remind teachers as well, unfortunately, our gut response when we're speaking to children when they cry, so often people will say, oh, don't cry. And it's not because they don't care or they just want to dismiss it or move on, but it's because they care so much and they feel uncomfortable with that expression of emotion. But actually, and in assembly I did this week about compassion, is I spoke to children and said, just cry. If you feel the need, cry it out, because that's an incredible, it can really help you release how you're feeling. It's a way of communicating with others how you feel as well. And then all of us, when we're responding in that situation, whether it's a colleague or to a child, thinking about how we can respond and just letting them know it's okay to cry, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable, just acknowledging it and just say, it's okay, I can see you're overwhelmed, I can see that you're sad. It means that we're not dismissing emotions and making it clear that there's no shame attached to how we're feeling. So apart from teaching the coping strategies, recognizing emotions, teaching those coping strategies, we also work really hard to help our students foster positive emotions. It's not about developing a toxic positivity at all. It's just about helping them think about how their brain is wired and how we can actually have a positive impact on those around us. Adrian Bethune, who does some amazing work in wellbeing with children, says it's about acknowledging that an emotional contagion exists, especially that moods and feelings are contagious between people. And I've really seen that the more we've worked on that, the ripple effect has just got greater and greater in our school as our students have worked on fostering that positive emotion. So first of all, we actually teach them that unfortunately our brain has a very strong negativity bias. Our brains are full of ants. They are automatic negative thoughts. And when you talk about it to begin with, they'll say, oh, no, I don't have any of those ants. And then you'll say, well, have you ever called yourself stupid? Oh, yeah, I do that all the time. Okay, well, that's an ant. And how can we challenge that ant? And we can use, as adults in the situation, we can use coaching questions. So things like, if my friend had this thought, what would I tell them? If somebody cared, someone who cares about me was giving advice, what would they say to me? Just to help them challenge those ants. And on the other hand, we also teach them about the importance of fostering the positive thoughts through compliments, acts of kindness, and gratitude. A lot of science and research has gone into this and has shown the huge benefits that focusing on all of this can do, both for us as individuals who are being grateful or instigating acts of kindness, on those who receive them, and on the ripple effect on those who observe them as well. So we've had all kinds of initiatives throughout the school. Here we've got a year 3 boy whose face is just full of joy. He left a post-it on a concierge's door to thank him for smiling every day when he comes into school. And our children have gratitude journals that they write in when they come into school. And one child said that he was grateful for pizza, that he can go to the toilet whenever he likes, because in his previous school he wasn't allowed to. And that was really important to him, and for such a good teacher. So I feel very proud that I'm up there with pizza and toilets. But how much can you learn about a child in just 3 sentences, understanding what they're grateful for? But I also learned in that moment, okay, this was a big deal for him in his old school. He's really happy about the fact that I just give him a nod when he wants to go to the toilet. Isn't that an important thing to learn about a child? And at home, of course, we can foster an atmosphere and a positive approach towards gratitude, even in a family. This is a photograph of my family gratitude jar that we have on the kitchen table. And yes, I got some major eye rolls when I introduced this. My daughters were 13 at the time. They were not impressed and they thought, oh, mum, come on. What really fascinated me was that I encouraged everyone in the family to write things they were grateful for and put them in the jar. And there was a level of reluctance and disinterest. And then last year, our dog died. And it was a very sad time. Our dog was 16. Our daughters had never known life without him. And over the couple of weeks that followed, I noticed that the number of post-its in the jar was increasing and our gratitude jar was filling up. And then one day, one of my daughters said, I think we need to have a special dinner and empty the gratitude jar. And we emptied it and we unfolded all these pieces of paper. And what had emerged is, in a moment of deep sadness, they remembered what I'd said, that when things are difficult, try to focus on what you're grateful for, as well as dealing with the sadness. And over half of those messages in the jar were about how grateful they were for the 16 years they'd had with our dog and the special times they'd had together. So we had cried and we'd talked about how we'd felt, we were feeling, and we'd explored all the tricky emotions. But all of a sudden, expressing that gratitude became important to them. And I felt that was a win as a parent. I thought, something is getting through. I'm getting there in some way. Now, what's really important when we're talking about our student wellbeing, of course, is that we need to consider our staff wellbeing within schools and our own parent wellbeing. And I heard that being mentioned before, because we can't talk about this unless we're being role models. And something that I used in a staff meeting with my own staff this week was this fantastic pyramid. We all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This really helps us explore what we need as individuals for our own emotional support. What would be at the base of your pyramid? What is key for you? What is less important, but it's what you'd like to have when you're thriving? But what do you need to remind yourself that you need to go back to in moments of need? And I think in whatever situation we're in, but yes, particularly when we're looking after children in our class, children in our homes during a pandemic, just pausing and taking the time to focus on what our own needs are and thinking about how we can care for ourselves is enormously important. And I think this is possibly the most important thing that we teach all of our students and all of our staff. And on a personal level, I went through a very difficult experience where I had to learn to do this. But there is incredible courage in learning to ask for help and recognizing, you know what, right now this is too much for me. And it's not an easy thing to do, but I've learned to do it. And it's a real joy to see that when you ask for help, particularly as a leader, but in any position, not only are you doing the right thing by yourself, but you're also reminding everybody else that you're giving them unspoken permission to ask for help themselves. And it's an incredibly powerful message to acknowledge that you're asking for help, and it will encourage others to do the same. Because ultimately, we cannot pour from an empty cup. We can't take care of our students unless we're taking care of ourselves. So what I hope you'll do is that you'll take away the idea of focusing on your pyramid and your needs and how you can look after yourself to then look after your students or your own children. And then I hope you found some practical ideas helpful that you could even use from this evening or tomorrow. So thank you so much for giving up your time to listen to me, and I hope some of that was helpful.